Welcome to the informational tutorial on how to be successful in service as a chapter volunteer leader for the American Society of Interior Designers. The purpose of this program is to give those interested in becoming or currently engaged as a chapter leader some foundational information to help you navigate the structure, responsibility, and opportunities that come with serving the society. First off, on behalf of the ASID headquarters staff team and the Society's national volunteer leadership, we thank you. You are participating today because you are currently serving as a chapter volunteer leader or are interested in stepping up to the mantle of leadership. Thank you for your support and dedication to ASID and our mission, and for your passion to helping the world see how the positive impact of interior design and interior designers is helping change people's lives and the world for the better. By the end of this program, you will understand ASID's mission, core value, strategic plan, and governing documents. You will be able to explain the duties and structure of an ASID chapter board, and you will learn where to find this and other information on the ASID headquarters website. The American Society of Interior Designers, or ASID for short, is a nonprofit association. Nonprofits are mission-driven organizations granted a special tax-exempt status by the IRS because nonprofits typically have a mission or purpose for some greater good or service. In order to achieve nonprofit status, organizations must be structured in a specific way, which we'll go into a little bit later in this presentation. As with any nonprofit, it is important for all our leaders and members to know and support our mission, as it is the reason why ASID exists. And one thing you should notice in all that we do, including the ASID website, is that our mission is always in the front, big and bold, and at the center of everything that we do. All surplus revenue of a nonprofit must be used to further the nonprofit's mission instead of going into the organization's shareholders. There are many legal and financial requirements for an organization to be granted and maintain tax-exempt status. For the purposes of this program, we're going to mainly focus on three. So first, all activities and surplus revenue should further and support the greater mission of the nonprofit. And being a democratic nation, U.S. nonprofit associations are based on democracy, where the strategic direction and priorities of an organization are determined by its elected board officials. And also, similar to American democracy, every nonprofit association has governing documents created at its founding similar to a constitution or the Bill of Rights that must be followed or amended through documented procedures. All these types of requirements are set by the U.S. government, mostly the IRS, to prove that nonprofit organizations are structured and governed to be mission-driven and that the funds and resources are used appropriately to support that mission. Our mission, sometimes called a why statement, is ASID advances the profession and communicates the impact of interior design to enhance the human experience. You can find this information in the About section on the main website of asid.org. ASID exists to further this mission. The chapters of ASID exist to further this mission. And all the programs, resources, and energy that we put into this organization, whether volunteer leaders, the general membership, or paid staff, should always go into furthering this mission. Or, as you saw on the main part of our website, quite simply, we know that design impacts life on this planet and the lives of all people on it. Humanitarian design activist and author of Design Revolution, Emily Pilliton, said, "I believe that design is problem solving with grace and foresight. I believe that design is a human instinct, that people are inherently optimistic, that every person is a designer, and that every problem can either be defined as a design problem, or solved with a design solution. Everyone who works as an interior designer or who has worked with designers sees the positive impact that interior design has every day. ASID depends on all of its volunteer leaders, chapters, and members to hold up and amplify this mission. So our mission then leads into 3 core values and strategic guideposts, focusing on how design impacts lives, ASID leads, and then also prepares and advances. We collaborate with others to lead efforts to promote the value of interior design. We prepare our members to excel and remain relevant in a dynamic and evolving profession. And we generate, collect, and disseminate knowledge that demonstrates and celebrates the power of design to positively change people's lives. But how do we get there? Remember how all nonprofits are required to have a governing elected body that determines the strategic direction? This process is called strategic planning. Corporations, nonprofits, and even individuals use this process to make better decisions, not just for the present, but decisions that will have a positive measurable impact in the present and in the future. Strategic plans are meant to look towards the future while hopefully building on past successes. At both the national and chapter level, resources are finite. While it would be great to have the resources to do everything, volunteers and staff time, organization finances, and overall capital are limited. Strategic plans help determine and evaluate the best allocation of resources. These plans also keep an organization focused, so that even if the people leading the plan change, the focus on the mission and overall goals of the organization are always front and center. In the fall of 2017, the National Board of ASID finalized and approved the Society's strategic plan from 2017 going through 2020. Focusing on the vision statement of ASID to enhance the profession and communicate the impact of design to enhance the human experience, the board decided on 5 strategic pillars or focuses for this plan. These pillars support our larger mission that drives all activities and the operations of ASID as a whole. So working from the top of the triangle and working our way down, these pillars include design impacts life, living the brand, which involves creating consistent experiences within all of ASID and its chapters, communication, diversity and inclusion, and alternative revenue streams. One of the most important tasks for you as a leader within ASID is to make sure that your chapter is in alignment with the larger mission and strategic plan of ASID. The ASID National Board, leadership, and staff are depending on you to help your leaders and volunteers, as well as the general members, to have a good understanding of the plan and factor that into all of the programs that you do. The only way we will achieve our mission to showcase the impact of design on the human experience and the value interior designers provide is to create a united front focused on achieving these larger goals. You can download a copy of the strategic plan in the About section of ASID's website. Familiarizing yourself with the mission, core values, and strategic plan is the first step in your roadmap to chapter leader service and success. It is also important to have a firm understanding of the ASID governance structure relating to chapters and the important duties and responsibilities you signed on to as a chapter leader, especially if you are one of the 8 elected chapter board members. So as the government requires all organizations granted a nonprofit tax-exempt status, in addition to state and federal law, ASID is governed by a set of documents that were adopted by the National Board of Directors on behalf of the membership at the founding of ASID in 1975. These documents are reviewed and occasionally revised to meet the changing needs of the society and its members. So starting there at the top, the documents there that are listed in red. The bylaws and policies of the society are the highest level of governance for the society. They are our constitution, in effect, the laws that govern the entire society. There are only one set of bylaws and policies for the entire organization, just as there is only one overreaching strategic plan that drives the direction of the organization. Chapters must be in compliance with the Society's bylaws and policies. As you take the oath of office as a chapter board member, you agree to abide by and uphold these rules and policies. It is essential, therefore, that you read the full ASID bylaws and policies, which you can also download by going to the About section of asid.org. Now, moving on down to the documents that are listed there in blue under Chapter Governing Documents. All chapters should have their own operational policies that explain how each chapter governs. Things like how often the board meets during a year, what type of board expenses are reimbursable, or what recurring committees exist beyond those required by the larger ASID bylaws and policies. Now, while the Society bylaws and policies can only be adjusted by a vote of the entire membership or national board action, chapter operational policies can be adjusted through official chapter board action. The chapter strategic plan outlines how each board plans to support and implement the larger ASID strategic plan through chapter tactics and programs, which then drives the chapter's programs and annual budget. Seeing how our society's governing documents are the foundation which drive everything emphasizes their importance. Knowing your chapter's operational policies and strategic plan and keeping all of these documents top of mind throughout your board year will help you keep your board focused. These are your roadmaps. Since you can't do everything, it keeps you focused on the types of programs and activities that your chapter board has agreed to focus on. Now, there are specific things related to our tax-exempt status. First off, chapters are not incorporated. In fact, chapters are prohibited from being incorporated in the ASID bylaws and policies. As such, all chapter activity creates some liability to the entire organization. This is one of the reasons why the ASID policies state that all chapter contracts must be sent to review to ASID headquarters before being signed. We review contracts to make sure language is in place to sufficiently protect the entire society and the entire membership from legal liability and risk. This is also why only the chapter president is authorized to sign contracts. There are many different tax designations within the codes for tax-exempt organizations. ASID, and therefore all of its chapters, are a 501c6, or a professional society that focuses primarily on education. This also means that we are allowed to engage in lobbying and influencing government action without receiving any tax penalties for those activities. But in exchange for that right, donations to ASID or its chapters are not tax deductible, as that is the rule set by the government for organizations that lobby. Now, there is an ASID foundation that collects money for research and education initiatives, and those donations are fully tax deductible. Now, and finally, in order for a chapter to maintain its legal chapter status, the government requires that all chapters must maintain a governing chapter board at quorum as determined by the bylaws of the organization, that each chapter must file its own annual tax return, and that each chapter must also hold annual elections to install new officers. And on that note, it's important to note that the chapter election candidates are determined by a nomination committee that acts independently of the chapter board. This committee is typically led by the immediate past chapter president. This is to avoid the current board having an undue influence over who will serve on the board in the future. Also outlined in the ASID policies are the defined positions of the 8 official positions that make up a chapter board. 6 of the positions are elected, including the president-elect and the director positions, including communications, financial, professional development, membership, and the at-large directors. ASID requires that all chapters hold elections for the same positions in the same years to better coordinate training at our annual leadership conference. A president-elect is elected each year from a professional or allied member. The communication, financial, and professional development directors are elected during odd fiscal years. And the remaining director positions, membership, director at large, are elected during even fiscal years. Now remember that the Society's fiscal year actually begins in October. So this means that the fiscal year elections for fiscal year 2018 included the president-elect as well as the communications, financial, and professional development directors. For the following year, for fiscal year 2019, would elect the president-elect and the membership and director at large. All director terms are 2 years. If someone leaves a position early, then the board appoints a replacement to that slot to finish out the remainder of the term. Directors can serve 2 consecutive terms in the same position. Presidents are prohibited from serving in the chapter president role for 2 years after leaving chapter president office. National board members are generally ineligible for chapter board service. And a student representative to the board is selected by the board, the chapter board, and appointed each spring for the following year. It's also important to know that at least one person on the board must be an industry partner. But industry partners are prohibited from serving in the president or president-elect role. And associate members currently are ineligible for chapter or national board service. There is an election kit that is put out by ASID headquarters each year that helps explain and outline the election and appointment process in much greater detail. One of the other requirements to maintain legal chapter status is that a chapter board must have quorum. So what does that mean? Quorum is defined in the ASID bylaws as 5 voting members. So except for the chapter president, all of the chapter board positions that we've previously been talking about receive a vote. So that includes the president-elect, student representative to the board, and the communications, financial, professional development, membership, and at-large directors. It's important to remember that no other volunteer leaders within the chapter receive a vote. According to the bylaws, for a board motion to be considered legal in the eyes of the law, 5 voting members must vote yes on a motion for it to pass. This is why it is so important that all board members attend and participate in meetings. If you have a full 8-person board and 3 voting members miss the meeting, then the board will not be able to legally pass a motion to approve a project or use the funds, which opens the society up to legal liability. The board could still meet to discuss plans, but the motion would have to be officially approved at the next meeting when quorum is established. The bylaws also state that board members must receive 14 days' notice of special meetings of the board. So if your board needs to meet about a special issue outside of its regularly established board meetings, please make sure that you give your board the proper notice. And the 14 days does include weekend days. And finally, official board meetings can be conducted via conference calls or Skype as long as all board members can hear each other clearly. The only exception to this are meetings to either amend the chapter operational policies or to approve the chapter strategic plan and budgets, which happen annually. As stated in the ASID bylaws, these meetings must be voted on where each member can see and hear each other. So for the official 8 elected and appointed members of the board, it is important to understand that with the mantle and powers of board leadership also comes certain legal and fiduciary responsibilities. Fiduciary basically means an ethical caretaker role. It's important to remember that The resources that come into your chapter do not belong to the board. The board is granted powers to make decisions on behalf of the members that elected them to office, similar to how government officials are supposed to act on behalf of their constituents. In addition to their specific job descriptions and responsibilities, all chapter board members are charged with 3 main responsibilities as caretakers of our member resources. We'll break these down on the next few slides. As you're listening to each of these, remember the legal principle of a reasonable person. As long as board members are acting as a reasonable person within limits and following the proper governance, then your decisions should be protected against legal action. Holding regular events with the intention of furthering programming and building up revenue could be described as reasonable. Spending more money than your chapter has on just one event that serves a small number of chapter members might not be considered reasonable if it was challenged in court. And it's important to remember that all board members have a fiduciary responsibility to the chapter's finances, even the student representative to the board. This is why it is imperative that all board members keep a close watch and a clear understanding of the chapter's finances. Explaining in a court of law that you did not read a report or understand the information presented to you would not be a justified excuse. Part of being on a board is intentionally acting as a caretaker of the resources you've been entrusted with. This includes everyone, not just the president, president-elect, and finance director. Some type of financial or budget update should be discussed at every board meeting. This is why returning back to the roadmap of your strategic plan and budget is so important. If your programs are performing better than expected, it could offer the opportunity to increase spending somewhere else or build up reserves for a rainy day. Or from the other side, if programs are underperforming, a reasonable person would cut back or readjust their spending to make sure there's still enough money to make it to the end of the year. Keeping tabs on committee spending can also help, but most importantly, if something doesn't make sense to you, speak up in a board meeting. That is one of the reasons you are there. So jumping into the different responsibilities or duties of board member service. The most important responsibility for board service is a duty of care. Please take a moment to read the slide on your screen. So going back to being a caretaker of the organization, this is why it is so important that board members act reasonably and prudently. When you are sitting in your board seat making decisions, your allegiance should be to your role as a board member. We recognize that each board member brings perspectives, biases, and relationships that could potentially benefit the board. But board members are expected to intentionally navigate separating their own personal or business self-interest from the best interest of the organization. Please take a moment to read the duty of loyalty on your screen. So this means not making decisions that would benefit a board member or their employer personally at the expense of the best interest of the chapter. Sometimes the two interests might intersect, but it's important that board members can trust that the entire board is making decisions with the best interest of the entire chapter in mind. And it's also important that the general chapter members have that same trust about their governing board. So related to this relates to a conflict of interest or a board member's duty to disclose. Conflicts of interest are going to happen. When they do, it is important that board members disclose conflicts to other board members to make sure the focus of a decision is on the best interest of the chapter. Please take a moment to read the conflict of interest statement on your screen. So for example, if you have a family member who is responding to a request for services by the chapter, you should disclose your relationship to the board. Some in this situation may even choose to abstain from a vote, or the chapter might decide to get multiple bids so that if anyone questions the decision to choose the family member of one of the board can show that it considered multiple options and truly went with the option that was in the best interest of the chapter. When conflicts of interest are not disclosed or ignored, it opens up the entire society to greater legal liability and risk. Now, the government provides special protections to whistleblowers who identify illegal, unethical, or fraudulent actions taken on behalf of an organization. Please take a moment to read the whistleblower policy on your screen. As a board member, it is even more important to bring any instances you may see within your chapter or the organization to the attention of ASID headquarters. Complaints should go immediately to ASID's CEO or the next highest ranking staff members. The Society also has a legal responsibility to protect the personal information of our members and customers. As volunteer leaders, you may receive access to the personal information of members for certain projects or purposes. When you are given this information as a part of your board role, remember this information is private and belongs to the Society. It should not be given out to others or used to further your own personal or personal business interest. And the third and final responsibility is a duty of obedience. Please take a moment to read the duty of obedience on your screen. A board should come to the best possible decision related to the best interest of the chapter through healthy discussion and debate. If a board member has disagreements or concerns during the board meeting is the time to bring it up. Once a board has voted on and approved a course of action, all board members have a responsibility to carry out and support that decision, even if they voted against it. Because just think about it, otherwise a board will not be effective if they are constantly having to revisit past discussions or not supporting the decisions that were approved by the board in a previous meeting. So to recap, remember, as a board member, you are legally expected to keep aware of what is happening to your chapter and to make decisions that ensure your chapter's financial solvency and success. 3 tips to help you succeed. Attend all meetings and review all communications related to board action and speak up when you have a question or concern. Remember to leave friendships outside of the boardroom. When making decisions, focus on the best interest of the chapter and not on personal relationships or feelings. As long as every board member is professional and agrees to focus on what's best for the chapter, this can help avoid conflicts and the perception that board members' self-interest are being placed above the needs of the chapter. There are 2 additional chapter board structural requirements outlined in the ASID policies that I want to remind everyone of. First, each chapter should have a Student Affairs Committee and chair. This position is different from the student representative to the board. While the student representative to the board is tasked with acting as a liaison to all student chapters, the Student Affairs Committee's primary responsibility is to ensure that communications and programming of value to students is provided at the chapter level. The chair is required to be filled by someone other than the membership director, which could include either an active ASID practitioner or industry partner. This position does not have a voting seat and reports to the membership director on the board. Also, chapters are required to have an Emerging Professionals Affairs Chair and an Emerging Professionals Affairs Committee to focus on new designers within 1 to 5 years of entering the workforce. This position also does not have a voting seat on the board. Both of these positions were added to the ASID policies as a board-identified strategic need to support the next generation of designers. And some chapters have affiliates within their chapters called design communities. It's important to make sure design community leaders understand they are an important part of implementing programs and services in their local community, but that approval of funds, signing of contracts, and so on are the responsibility of the elected chapter board because they're charged with the fiduciary responsibility of the chapter members and resources, and as elected board members get certain legal protections. Design communities do not need to maintain quorum, submit tax returns, or hold elections because the chapter board is taking on all those legal responsibilities and risk. Making sure how money is allotted and administered to design communities in your chapter's operational policies can be a great way to keep expectations clear on both sides. We've covered a lot of information in this program, so to recap some of the main points, first, know the mission, strategic plan, and other governing documents of the society and your chapter. This will keep you focused on our strategic purpose and how your chapter is working every day to help ASID achieve its mission of promoting and proving how design impacts lives in positive ways every day. Make sure your board keeps and maintains quorum so it can maintain its autonomy to make decisions and actions in support of the mission of ASID. Know which positions count towards quorum and which positions do not. And always remember, as a board member, you have a fiduciary responsibility to act as a caretaker of the organization, where you make decisions as a reasonable person and you give your loyalty and obedience to the best interest of the chapter when making decisions in your board role. I encourage you to familiarize yourself with the ASID website, especially the About ASID section, resources, and the Belong sections, where a lot of the information from this presentation was gathered from. In addition, there is a national volunteer group within ASID called the Chapter Support Team that exists to provide peer-to-peer support. Made up of former chapter leaders, this group communicates directly with chapter presidents, but can also be a great resource as different chapter issues or opportunities arise. Thank you again for your time today and for your enthusiasm for helping to support the mission of promoting how design impacts lives. If you have any additional questions about this program or chapter development, please email chapters, that's chapters with an S, chapters@asid.org, and we thank you again for your service.